Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to BL Perspectives. This is episode 3 of a YouTube series brought to you by BoxLunch, where we discuss social issues as they relate to pop culture and explore how they intersect with real life. If you haven't seen the first 2 episodes yet, come on, just check them out. They're in the link below. I'm your host and moderator, Albert Lawrence. And if you're not familiar with BoxLunch, they are the pop culture destination with the best merchandise from all of your favorite fandoms. You can find them at a mall near you or online at boxlunch.com. In the 3rd episode of our 4-part series on race and pop culture, we're exploring the minority experience within pop culture, specifically how pop culture is appreciated and expressed within different communities. We'll also discuss the boundaries between appreciation and appropriation. Now, for this discussion, we've invited a few special guests to dive deeper into these topics and share their own experiences. With that being said, I'm thrilled to introduce you to our panelists. Welcome, Geza Fry Jr. Geza is a content creator and influencer with a background in the sneaker and fashion industry. Raised in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and now based in Inglewood, California, Geza has worked with the likes of Adidas, Reebok, and Finish Line. Welcome, Geza.
Appreciate you. Thank you so much for having me.
Now we have Richard GUINTO. Richard is a writer and editor who currently serves as managing editor at Foodbeast.com. Aside from his editorial duties, Richard is also the host and producer of Foodbeast's digital series, Taste the Details, that highlights the unique cultures, people, and dishes within the restaurant industry. Welcome, Richard.
Happy to be here. Thank you, guys.
And now let's welcome Tyree DILIHAY. Tyree is an artist and animator who is currently a director at Sony Pictures Animation. He was also nominated for 2 Primetime Emmys for his previous work on Bob's Burgers. Tyree's other credits include Hair Love, Jammiesand, and Pink Panther and Pals. And aside from his studio work, Tyree is also the creator of the popular webcomic series SNEDS.
Albert, it's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yes. Now look, now that we've got all of these creatives assembled, I thank you for participating in this discussion. We look forward to hearing your thoughts. So let's just get this thing kicked off. So starting off this conversation with an exploration and discussion of cultural appreciation and cultural appropriation within pop culture. Y'all, I know that there can sometimes be a very thin line, and sometimes it seems like that line oscillates and things step on it or roll on it. So I'm very intrigued about kind of understanding, how do you define these 2 ideas, and when do you think that one crosses over and becomes the other? I'm going to start this one off with Geza. Geza, what are your thoughts? Appropriation, appreciation.
For me, appropriation starts when somebody tries to tell somebody else's story, whether it be a culture, whether it be a person, whether it be a whole people group. When someone else takes that story and tries to tell it as their own. Appreciation is when that person taps into that culture, that the story they want to tell. They give that person a role and they give that person creative direction. I think that we've seen a lot of movies come out lately where they're tapping into those cultures and they're seeing the people that are from where they're filming at, and they're getting those direct insights opposed to just doing what they want to do. And I think, over the last 20 years, we've seen so many movies fail because of that. They'll film in an area where there's something going on and they didn't do the right research, or they'll cast the wrong actor for a role that is a completely different race in the source material. And I think we see that, happen time and time again. But now I think in 2020, in 2019, we're seeing these directors and producers tap into the local culture, tap into the stories that they want to tell, as opposed to just taking that story and running with it.
Richard and Tyree, does any of that resonate with you, or do you see appropriation and appreciation as maybe being slightly different?
Appropriation cannot delve into appreciation when certain aspects are missing, and that is effort, attribution, and respect. And all that goes hand in hand in terms of giving due attribution to said culture and sources and roots, also making the effort to learn about it and making sure that everything is correctly represented, and respect by being aware of cultural cues and correctly applying them. If you ever want appropriation to delve more into the appreciation aspect, those qualities are crucial.
It seems like one of the things you said that really does also tie in with a key fact that Geza brought up was research. It's like you gotta,
Yeah.
it's like you gotta do the research. Now, Tyree, as someone, you've been in many different rooms, and in some of those rooms, you've been leading the discussions. Do you feel like research is something that is necessary for appropriation to no longer be that and to become appreciation?
Oh, definitely. But here's the thing. You have to do less work on the research end if you just bring the people, the creators, to the table to have those discussions. I'm all about efficiency. So rather than having to dig through the history books, why not just go to an oracle, a sage, an OG, if you will, and let them sit at the table and let them tell you their experience real time? Because, I mean, I'm kind of old, but I was there. And then there's my parents, they were there. And the grandparents, they were there. So reach back, grab these people. They have wisdom to share. And the great thing about today is it's the greatest confluence of culture that we've ever seen, ever in the history of American pop culture. So if you blend all these worlds, get different masters in these rooms and have them talk about it and let you know from their real world experience.
I mean, that does sound a little easier than doing the research, like you said, bringing it in. But I think that then that also opens up another apparent issue, which is, sometimes the lack of diversity in some of these different rooms, and especially if you're deciding to take on a story that is truly woven into the fabric of a particular culture, but you don't happen to have anyone from that culture there to represent, not necessarily to be like the voice of the people, but at least someone there who might have some extra tie to it. That can be an issue. So all three of you're discussing this, of course, from a creator standpoint, right? Because all three of you make content. You all are creating. But I want to think about the fans to a degree as well, too, because I think a lot of the people that are watching this might just straight up be fans of content. As a fan, when does your appropriation become appreciation, or how do you make sure that you are appreciating a character instead of appropriating it? And so, like, just to make that specific, if you want to dress up as someone who is of a particular culture or a race that you don't happen to belong to, but you love that property, right? So if I wanted to dress up as Black Panther, or let's say if I wanted to be Maui from Moana, can I do that? And if I can do that, what's the right way? Is there a proper way? Starting off, see, all three of you got some grins on your face now. Let me see, Richard, since you got the fingers on your chin, that's the thinking face. What's going on?
I mean, personally, I myself wouldn't try to attempt, even if my heart is in the right place and it's coming from a place of appreciation, I wouldn't even try to make an attempt of trying to make a caricature out of somebody's culture. No matter where my heart is and no matter where my intentions are, I don't want to toe that line. And also, it's just, it's a slippery slope, I'd say, for me.
Okay, I'm going to try to crack more into that, Richard, but I'm giving you a break for a little second. Give you a break. Tyree,
off the top, that's how I'm feeling, off the top.
This is good. What's your perspective on this, Tyree?
I want to relate it to another character from the Marvel universe, the Marvel Comics universe, and that would be Spider-Man, right? Mm-hmm. So over here at Sony Pictures Animation, we're responsible for Miles Morales being the first Black Spider-Man. And it gets no better than that. And a big thematic in the film is anyone can wear the mask, right? So the point is if you tap into these universal ideas and normalize that it could be a Black character, it could be a white character, it could be a Latino character, it could be a Filipino character, it can be any character, any shade you want to make it, but the themes still resonate universally.
You spoke about Spider-Man, and Spider-Man, yes, anyone can be Spider-Man because you can just put the mask on. The same thing with Black Panther. But if we look at some of the other examples of people who are from particular cultures, so for example, if we're looking at some characters from anime, right, and someone dresses in a piece of garb that might be traditional to a particular character in that anime, but you're not from that culture, can you do that?
When it comes to a culture, when it comes to Mulan, when it comes to Moana, when it comes to the actual historic dress, like it's not a character at that point. So I believe that, you know, you should let that culture have their hero, because white culture especially has so many heroes. They have so many people they can dress up as. But I think us black and brown people, we have to pick and choose from the ones that we love. So I think that it's just a really, really, really fine line, and you got to be extra careful with the characters you want to dress like. Got to be extra careful when you go cosplaying, and if it feels like you have to question it, if it feels like something is wrong, then something's wrong, you know?
Mm-hmm. That seems to be just like a really great rule of thumb, Geza.
Yeah. If you look in the mirror and you just, you know, you don't feel right about it, it's okay to take the costume off. It's okay to rethink your cosplay. It's all right. Like there's plenty of characters out there to dress like, to choose from, that aren't disrespectful. Like Spider-Man, for example, and you can represent that as any color. Like that is the ultimate costume, I think, that represents hope, and that for kids, you know, it makes you feel like you can be more than yourself.
And you know, like, even though, you know, we're talking about dressing up as things, just because maybe you might not want to, you might not feel comfortable dressing up as a person, you can still be a major fan. You know what I'm saying? You can still be a fan of somebody, of something that doesn't look just like you. So I'd love to actually hear from the three of you, whether this fandom maybe is for a particular property or person that is from a shared culture as yourself, or if it's from, you know, a completely different culture than your own. What are some of the things that you are fans of yourselves?
Off top, when you say fans, being a fan of and then trying to like look or dress like it, I love Bob Marley, I love reggae music, but I'm not gonna try to pass off as some Rastafarian and start growing dreads and, you know, try to take it 100% as I'm a Rastafarian Bob Marley. You know, that's when it becomes ridiculous and it becomes a costume and it becomes just a tokenization of who you're trying to respect, but in the wrong way.
Okay, so what are you a fan of?
Yeah, man, I'm a fan. I love, you know, Japanese culture. I love fashion from everywhere, from Paris, from Europe. I love sneakers. I love footwear. I think that, you know, like you said, aside from dressing up like the character, I think especially BoxLunch provides so many opportunities for fans to dress up and represent that character without dressing as that character. Like your Avatar shirt, like that's super dope. But if you were dressed like Avatar right now, we'd probably all be looking at you crazy. But I think that just finding those cool fashion pieces, and like I've seen other brands also like just put out dope pieces that represent the fandom and represent that culture, and I think that you can pair that with a dope pair of jeans, a nice pair of sneakers, and you call it a day instead of, you know, putting on the whole costume all the time.
So it sounds like you're saying, you know, the idea of wearing something in a fashion space, kind of with a fashion ideal, but not dressing up as a person. So fashion versus cosplay, is that a thin line, or is there like a true demarcation there for you?
For me, I mean, if you dress up as Moana and you go to an event dressed up as her, I think it's a completely different as if you go in a shirt that says Moana. Like, it's a different way of showing support. It's not making that character a caricature. And I think that that delves into the line of parody. And it's not a parody. It gives people hope and it gives people joy.
Tyree, I'm going to come to you now because, you know, as someone, you have created characters, right? And have you seen anyone yet dress up as any of the characters that you have originated?
Bob's Burgers.
Yeah.
Now, personally, just you know, for any legal people out there, I did not create Bob's Burgers. Okay, I was a director. I was a director on the show. That's it. You know, it's shout out to Lauren Bouchard. He's the creator. Okay, just want to get that out there. But being responsible for telling Bob's Burgers story from week to week for years and years, and seeing it transfer to the little show that could, to becoming like a pop culture phenomenon, like that's special. Right. So every year on my Instagram, I've been giving, since Instagram's inception, I've been giving shout outs to all the people that have been Bob's Burgers cosplaying throughout the years. And we've seen it from across cultures. Like, just to make it also clear, Bob's Burgers is about a white family. OK, I was at an event and I was drawing pictures for people, you know, promoting the work I do. And a guy came up to me. He was like, "Hey, man, you're that dude that makes the Bob's Burger stuff, right? And I'm like, yeah. He was like, and he's talking to his friends. This is a Latino cat, and he's talking to him. He was like, hey, he was like, tell him. He was like, they're Mexican, right? And I was like, no, they're white. And he was like, wait, what? They're white. Like, I was like, yeah, man. He was like, oh man, forget it. He was like, hey, but I still love them, you know? So it's weird that he was identifying with them, their story, their struggle. And he was able to still put himself in their shoes. He felt that they were one and the same, like they were family, but just from a cultural background standpoint, but maybe also from a storytelling and just a human standpoint, he could just relate to them. So after I just made that clear, it's like, okay, well, we don't come from the same cultural background, but I identify with their struggle. And I was like, now that was key. And it's coming through in the costumes and the appreciation for Bob's Burgers year after year after year. And seeing that, like from the Tumblr days where people were throwing up loops of Tina, you know, like twerking and doing all this stuff, right? Like that thing, it never dies. It's classic. But to be a part of that, I mean, it was special. It was special for real.
That's epic right there. And it's funny because actually in one of our other conversations, we talked about representation in terms of specificity necessary. So for example, you know, if you're going to have a film, if you're going to have a television show about a person who comes from a background that's considered a cultural minority, do you need to pinpoint like exactly, like don't just say African, because Africa is a continent, right? So like, do you need to say exactly where that person is from, for example, in order to properly represent? Or is it okay to let things be a little bit looser? So that's interesting that with Bob's Burgers, in a way, since it hasn't been incredibly clear to clearly everyone necessarily what the background of Bob's family is, in a way, do you feel like that's made the family that much more relatable?
Oh, for sure. Sure. But what also I want to say though is Bob's Burgers has been great. Animation domination on the Fox network has been great. But where's the black shows? Where's the shows from other cultures, other animated shows that have been on Primetime? I think the only example we have of that is like the Cleveland show, and that was created by Seth MacFarlane, a non-BIPOC, right? So I'm trying to understand. And voiced, yeah, multiple characters. So it's like there's some things that need to change from the top down, you know, when we're having other people tell our stories. But again, that goes to your earlier point about appropriation. Is where is the line?
I love that you just brought that up, the whole idea of, you know, what arises when you have other people telling other stories, because I feel like in the early ages of Hollywood, especially when it came to telling stories about Black and Indigenous people of color and their cultures, those people weren't always necessarily in the room. And in fact, a lot of times they weren't in the room. And because of that, you know, the stories weren't always the most authentic. We'll just say that. We still have a long way to go, but things have changed now to a degree, right? Because in recent years, we've seen some of the big budget pictures like Black Panther and Coco, for example, that are truly highlighting authentic portions and experiences within these cultures. And these narratives are now powered by research. But I want to go back in time for a little bit and find out from each of you, what were some of the pop cultural properties? What were some of the characters maybe that you grew up with, that early on you related with because you saw yourself in those characters?
Man, Rufio from Hook. Bruh, when I seen a brown Filipino dude like as a main character, and he was a badass, like, and he was doing his thing, and he was one of the focal points of the story. I was like, that's me. You know, I could see myself in that, and I related to it, I resonated to it, and it was just something that you never seen before as a Filipino person. And even Surf Ninjas, I don't know if y'all remember that movie.
Oh my gosh, Surf Ninjas.
Yo, growing up, you know, they had these Filipino characters there, and I was just like, we can be that, and you know, I can attach myself to that. And I thought that was very valuable. And another example I want to bring up, and it's not even something I grew up with, but something that kids right now are growing up with is Blue's Clues. And there's this actor, Josh De La Cruz, and he is the host. He's a Filipino cat, host of Blue's Clues. And, you know, all these little kids are growing up watching a Filipino dude doing the mano po, bringing his Lola on the show and making bibingka. And that's special because that shows that it's going to pave the way even more for Filipino kids who want to believe and who want to achieve something that, you know, they see on screen.
Geza, what about you? Who was it that you connected with, that you saw yourself as?
For me, this is honestly a really, really tough question. And it took me a long time to really think about it, because I think as a kid, I didn't see anyone that was my culture. You know, I'm mixed. My mom's family is from Puerto Rico. I still to this day haven't seen like a Puerto Rican hero, you know what I mean? But I was able to relate. I was a kid. I was relating to Saturday morning cartoons. You know, Pokemon. Static Shock was one of my favorites. I loved the Proud Family. Like those were all my go-tos. But I would have to say, like, if I had to choose one, it would be Static Shock. He was the one I would every Saturday morning I would wake up WB and I would watch that. And man, I can't wait till there's a live action version.
It's funny that you brought up Static Shock live action, because during our last conversation in the last episode, one of the folks who was on the panel, Cleo, he was actually campaigning. He wants to be a villain from Static Shock in the live action one.
Hey,
Nice.
I love to see it.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Tyree, who was it for you?
I kind of think of mine in eras, right? So early on, it was Eddie Murphy as Axel Foley in Beverly Hills Cop.
Oh, wow.
And then it was Theo Huxtable in The Cosby Show. And then it was Will Smith as the Fresh Prince in The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. And then, I got to throw this in there. I'm sorry. Spike Lee as Mars Blackman. Like those are pivotal for me. And then I've already mentioned him, but Miles Morales today. Because Miles Morales almost seems like he's the child of all of those things, if that makes sense. But Spike Lee, like if I just run through him real quick, Spike Lee hit me because that was my first example of seeing a black filmmaker in an all-black cast. I'd never seen that before. And it was a black and white film. When you look at the first She's Gotta Have It, I was like, wow. So at that point, I'm looking at, whoa, like my dream of becoming a filmmaker, a director in Hollywood is possible, because up until that point, there was no representation. There was nobody making noise at that level. That was a person of color. And you see Theo Huxtable and you see this kid coming from a great family. I came from a single family home, just me and my mom. But you see Theo Huxtable had a doctor and a lawyer for parents. I'm like, whoa, that's aspirational. And I ended up going to a private school in middle school, right? And my friends are people like that, and they're people of color and coming from different cultures. I was like, wow, that's pivotal, because he's going through the same experience I'm going through, and it doesn't matter that his parents are richer than I am. He's still a teenager going through teenage problems, and that's relatable to me. And then going to the Fresh Prince. I mean, you can relate to this, Gazer, right? Like coming from Philly. But the fact that he came from Philly, and the line literally is, I got into one little fight and my mom got scared. You moving with your uncle and auntie in Bel-Air, right? Like she didn't want Will Smith to become a statistic, right? And that I could relate to that because, you know, like Gazer, you're in Inglewood. I'm from Inglewood. And I grew up in Inglewood during gang culture, the height of it. We're talking about when Colors came out. But then we move into today, and I'm looking at Miles Morales, and he's going through the same struggles. You know, this Afro-Cuban kid from Brooklyn, parents sending him to a school called Visions, a private school, similar to my situation, coming from Inglewood, going to downtown LA, going to a private school. And Miles is up there self-sabotaging himself, but his parents are telling him, and the whole theme of the movie, part of the theme of the movie is great expectations. You have so much power if you just take it, accept responsibility for the hero that you become, and you're bigger than your surroundings. Like these are powerful moments for me. And like I said, me as an older head, but looking at Miles Morales, I'm like, that's still my story. At the end of the day, that's still my story. Doesn't matter if it just happened in 2018, it's still resonant.
Oh, I love it. I love it. For me, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, Zach, the Black Ranger. He was,
So tell me why he had to do a body roll each time he had to do a karate move.
Every time.
Because
The only one. The only
He had to let you know.
The
He was
only way
like,
it works.
you know what I'm saying?
The only way. Oh man, the Mastodon needed that. So, but
Were you
Oh,
cosplaying?
man.
right, yes, but it's funny because back in the day, I remember the costumes that we'd be able to buy from the store. They all had like it was these huge helmets. So the oversized helmets where you just really look like a cartoon walking down the street in that. But one of the things that I do think is really neat about the characters that all three of you shared, and for example, you know, some of you felt more close to some of the characters versus like sometimes we just like kind of gaze at what you mentioned. You're like, maybe there wasn't somebody who was like specifically you, right? So you just went for like who still spoke to you. And I feel like the idea of self-efficacy, honestly, is something that kind of bubbled up within the three of you in terms of feeling like seeing someone who you related to doing something kind of also helped you perhaps feel as though you could also achieve that thing, or at least kind of helped you to feel like you weren't alone in doing your thing, in making your own hustle. Richard, do you kind of also still like empathize with that? Do you feel maybe with Surf Ninjas, like was there something that was going on in there that really did connect with you and where you were at in your life?
Drawing from that Surf Ninjas example, like, you know, Filipino brown kids can be the star of a major motion picture. And also I could jump into my contemporaries where it's like you see David Chang, you see Padma Lakshmi, they're hosting their own food shows and telling stories of other BIPOCs and in the food industry. And it's like for someone as a minority to be handed the keys to telling those unique stories is valuable, and it's encouraging for me.
I want to tap into the food a little more later too, because that's an incredible lens that you get a chance to bring to this whole entire conversation. Now, Geza, you are so involved in fashion culture, and fashion is so much often about like looking to the future, but then also kind of marrying the past with the future in order to create the current pop culture. When it comes to pop culture, what do you hope to see happen within the next few years?
Man, honestly, I would love to see more Black and brown people getting that bag and getting the opportunity to tell those stories. I know there's so many screenwriters out there who have amazing stories put together, just ready to go. And I would love to see, you know, a Puerto Rican hero. I would love to see just those heroes that matter and that give people hope. You know, I would love to see less of just the box office and more of that storytelling and that development and that representation and giving kids hope, like giving kids someone that they can see on screen.
It seems like the natural person to kind of follow up then with that, Geza, is Tyree. Because Tyree, you're in those rooms. You're in the rooms. You're involved in the projects, and you actually do know some about the future of if some of those kind of heroes that Geza just mentioned are going to be coming on up. So what can you share with us? But then also, what are you hoping for?
Well, my contract says I can share absolutely nothing.
We had to try.
Nice one, nice.
But what I can assure you of is that the people that belong in the room are in the room. And people at this level, in this day and age, with this heightened sensitivity in the climate, the political climate, and the social climate that we're in right now, they're paying extra special attention to getting it right for the future. Because we've been in a wrong place for a long, we'll say about, I don't know, maybe 3.5 years, maybe. Going on 4, and hopefully we're going to right this wrong. And I think it starts with art. You know, I think all movements start from art. Art will tell you where the world is going, and the world needs to content-wise, the world needs to look like the world. It needs to be a reflection of the world we live in on a day-to-day basis. It shouldn't look like, yes, it's going to have some fantasy element to it, but you can't tell me this film that's based in the 1800s, since it's fantasy, it can't have any people of color in it. Like, it's still a fantasy. Like, it's one thing to be historically accurate, but if we're going to tell stories that are reflective of the people today, they need to be able to relate to these things, to find common threads. to have that shared experience of, number one, just being a human, and number two, just the normalcy of being a person of color. Like, that shouldn't be an anomaly anymore. It should just be a part of life.
Do you think that the incorporation of more and more people of color in pop culture, is that a trend, you think? Or is this something that you think is here to stay and something that you can imagine having a broader future?
For me, I bristle at calling certain cultures a trend, if that makes sense. Like, it's not, it may be a trend to a white lens. It might be maybe a trend to an American lens, but to people like me, to people of other cultures and nationalities, that's their reality. Their reality isn't the trend, you know what I'm saying? So when things start going into like, oh, Filipino food is hot, it's the trend, it's on the come up, it's like, nah, it's just more white dudes knowing about it, you know? To us, it's always been that thing. And we love that you love the Filipino food. We love that you're down to have some lumpia adobo with us. But that's not gonna go anyway anytime soon just because you get tired of it.
I think that's so strong, and also instantly and easily a parallel within other areas of pop culture, right? Because it's like, just because, you know, we're finally getting a princess who looks like this, or we're finally getting a fantasy that includes people like this, or casting is looking like this. These people have been here the whole time, and we're still going to be here even if you don't acknowledge, right? So wow, thank you, Richard. That's legit.
I got you.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, and I know this is like kind of going off the tangent to a degree, but also I love that food is something that we all have some sort of a reaction to. We all come to the table in some sort of way, and I feel like food pairs with pop culture so beautifully and so well, because we see films and TV shows that are using food to export culture as well, right? And so people are consuming it without it being forced down.
I think it goes hand in hand because pop culture and food are so easily digestible in different ways, and we gravitated toward, because a lot of our own memories are hinged on pop culture and food. It's like the most deep-seated type of memories and experiences that we have are hinged on those two things.
Shout out for the digestible pun right there. I see you, Richard.
Yeah,
I'm trying.
That was a bar. Okay.
That was
Okay. I'm trying to get on your level.
Okay, so while we're here, let's dig even further. Let's dig a little deeper into the minority culture experience within fandom. So, growing up, you know, you had your own sort of fandom that you were in, but that doesn't necessarily mean that everybody in your community, or honestly even in your household, still had that same kind of connection. So what was being a fan like for you? So for example, around you, did other people appreciate your fandom, or were you perhaps treated a little differently, or did you maybe even hide a little bit of what you were a fan of in those days?
Growing up, I was into a lot of different things in terms of pop culture. I was into, I'm still am a big pro wrestling nerd, and I got so deep into my love for hip hop that I, you know, represented all of the four elements. I was, you know, I DJ'd, I b-boyed, I did graffiti, I did MCing a little bit, but DJing stuck with me the longest. So like, I was definitely a fandom of that as well. But you know, in especially with hip hop, because it's such a distinct and very specific culture. There's a lot to pay homage to and pay respect to, and I'll give attribution to. And like we touched on before, that you got to be careful and you got to pay the proper and due respect to be in that fandom, because you know what, you're going to be called out as a sucker and a fake and a poser in some circles and fandoms if you don't pay the proper homage and respect to it.
Okay, so let's see. Geza, what about you? Did everyone around you kind of vibe with what you were into?
I think for me, it honestly just depended on where I was at. So my family, my mom was super religious, super into the church. You know, I loved Pokemon. I was on my Game Boy. You know, they called that of the devil. I was into Dragon Ball Z. But at school, I was able to build these like little communities, and we were able to trade Pokemon cards on the low, but I had to keep everything like super on the low with my family because of the way it was perceived among them. But I think at school, like, that was where I was able to kind of go wild and like learn everything. I remember when like YouTube became a thing, there was all these like endless Dragon Ball Z videos, and I would watch them all and learn everything, and then go to school with my friends and talk about, you know, everything. And the school aspect of it was great, but at home I hated having to like hide who I was and hide what I loved just because of the way it was perceived.
And it's because your mom knew that Pokemon stood for pocket monsters, Geza. She was like, no monsters in this home.
Oh my goodness, you don't know how many times I heard that, man. And like it was a real thing. Like, I still can't believe that they thought this way, like the thinking of the church community when it came to pop culture.
It's fascinating. I also grew up in the church, so I know where you're coming from, for sure. And because look, and I think everybody can sort of weigh in on this too. Within pop culture, and you know, and thinking about Pokemon, thinking about Dragon Ball Z, the imagery is very vivid, right? And like there are some horrific and frightening looking creatures and whatnot. So, you know, religion, traditional religion, and that pop culture might not always be such a perfect marriage.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you. And but I think that, you know, in the year 2020, my brother, you know, plays Pokemon Go with his friends. He's on Fortnite, you know, killing people. But it's just I think that they've become a lot more accepting and understanding of art and pop culture. I think when I was growing up, like, Pokemon was such a new concept. It was such a new thing. Like Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, Digimon. When all those things hit, it was like the church was like, what is this? These kids can't be carrying that around in their pocket. But now I definitely see way more acceptance among like the religious community. And I'm glad it's gotten to that point, and I hope it continues, because it's, at the end of the day, it's art, it's fandom, it's something that, you know, a kid loves, and when kids find things they love, I think it's important to foster those ideas.
Pro wrestling was a no-no for me growing up.
Oh, really?
Because of my family grew up as a Jehovah's Witness, and so like any type of violence, even though pro wrestling was perceived as choreographed in some ways, in some manner, like they just saw it as people beating each other up. And that was forbidden in the household. I had to watch Monday Night Raw on the low whenever my mom's was around. So, you know.
I mean, it's called Monday Night Raw, for God's sake. She didn't know what the hell you were watching. It was like, you want to watch what? That is forbidden.
Anything Raw forbidden out here.
Tyree, what was your version of Monday Night Raw and Pokemon? Was there anything that you had to hide from your peers or even from your own family that you were into?
Nah, you know what's crazy? Like, I was just that weird kid in the hood, right? Like, the stuff that I was into, my equivalent to the Pokemon thing would be, I was into this magazine called Fangoria, and it was about special makeup effects, and actually it's glorifying violence, right? Like the gore of people ripping bodies apart, or Michael Jackson turning into a werewolf in Thriller, or American Werewolf in London, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the Friday the 13th, like these OG horror movies. Like I was into that stuff, but not like I was like I wanted to be a serial killer. I loved it just strictly for the art. So people were looking at me like, Tyree, what the hell are you doing? And it was more like, what the hell are you doing in terms of black people shouldn't be into this. Like that's not our thing. Don't you want to go play basketball, or, you know, play football, or go do the quote unquote normal things that you do in these circles? And I was like, yeah, I did that stuff too. I was really into basketball. That's how I got into sneakers, the connection with Michael Jordan and whatnot. But I was also doing special makeup effects and drawing and into comics and things like that. So I was like this eclectic kid. Like I'm taking a little bit of everything. It's like if I like it, I'm messing with it. You know, jumped on a skateboard, broke my arm. I was like, okay, that's not for me. Played basketball and realized that I didn't like running. And I was like, well, I can't make this a career. and then got into art, and I was just like, I can do this all day, every day. And I don't care who loves me for it or hates me for it. I'm going to do it regardless, because it's like air for me. Like creating art is oxygen, and I wasn't going to let anybody push me off my square to be like, go do something else. My mom even asked me. Now you got to remember, I got plaster casts of my friends' heads, hands, feet, body parts, like prosthetics and stuff, all in my room. And my mother comes in one day, like literally going like this. She's like, "Baby, like, what are you planning to do with all this?" like and I'm like, what are you talking about? She's like, this is a true story. She's like, "I don't really see us doing this." And I was like, what do you mean? She's like black people, like this isn't our thing, like our thing. And I literally, at 13 years old, I said, "I'm your son." I was like, "You're supposed to tell me I can do anything I want to do. Anything." And then she actually looked at me kind of stumped and was like, "You're right. You're absolutely right. You won't hear that ever from me ever again." And then from then on, it was like Tyree's going to be Tyree. And I'm still Tyree to this day. I'm proud to say Tyree is still Tyree today.
That was a bold 13-year-old. Where did you get that kind of confidence from, man?
I'm looking at what I was into. I was talented at it. And I'm saying, this is what I want to do. You know, the same way a kid was picking up a basketball and it's like, yo, I want to be like Jordan. Trust me, I wanted to be like Mike too. But I just love this a little bit. You see me, I'm pointing to this Wacom monitor over here. I wanted to do this. Like, this is where I'm at. Creativity in a different form. Because I always look at Michael Jordan as like the Michelangelo of basketball. But I wanted to be the Michelangelo of my thing, of animation.
That's so inspiring, man. He said it with his whole chest. I love it. I'm fully encouraged right now.
Let's go get this. Let's go get it.
You know?
Got me inspired.
Right? Well, Tyree, something that you said when you talked about sports and when you talked about almost, I know like from the outside, especially maybe back in the day, it could seem like sports are over here and then the arts and pop culture are over here. But
Yes.
for me, what helped to connect that and bridge that was Space Jam. Like when Michael, and I was like, oh my gosh, the Looney Tunes are Bugs Bunny. Okay, now I can get into this. And then you had those sneakers. And it's so wild that the sneakers, they've come back and Space Jam has come back. So can we just spend a little moment, if everybody on this panel has any sort of connection to Space Jam, can we talk about where you were in your life when you encountered Space Jam?
So again, like I'm looking at Space Jam in real time. For me, obviously I was already there because of the cartoons, but to see my worlds collide, right? I don't know if we're allowed to show it, but the picture of Mars Blackman and Spike Lee, the best on Earth and the best on Mars, that was the beginning of it. Like I said, I saw the best black filmmaker and the best black basketball player together. And I was like, boom, right? Now, I'm already in the cartoons, and when Space Jam came out, now I got the best basketball player on the planet with the thing that I love and I want to do. I'm in heaven at this point. You know, it's everything that I love is happening all at once. Now, granted, I was a little, what was I? We won't get into how old I was back then, but to see it finally happen, it was a big moment for me. It was special.
Gaza, where were you when Space Jam dropped?
Man, I was a kid. I don't remember what year Space Jam came out, but I was born in '92. So I remember being a kid and my dad like introducing me to Michael Jordan and playing those highlights consistently, and then Space Jam dropping and him buying me the VHS and us watching it together like consistently. The moment when Jordan is with his dad and I Believe I Can Fly comes on, that scene always plays in my head, like anytime I think about my pops. But he definitely was one to introduce me, because I was still a kid when Jordan had his dominance. And but I grew up playing football and basketball, and I wanted to say that when I was a kid, I was 13 when I bought my first pair of sneakers, and it was the Michael Vick sneakers. And I wanted to be a football player my entire life, and I felt like when I put those on, like I even played a game on turf with them, because I was like, I can play like Vick when I wear these. And the way Nike was marketing him with the Michael Vick experience, they brought that into pop culture, and the commercials were so incredible. It made you feel like you could be Vick, you could be like Mike if you wore those shoes, and that's how I felt. And I still feel the same way about Jordan to this day too, with all the collabs and the retros he's been doing, and Space Jam 2 coming out. I think that it's just a revitalization of his own brand.
Amen. Shoot. Richard?
For Space Jam, I believe I was in like 5th or 6th grade. I'm a huge basketball nerd, and to be able to see somebody like Mike, I wasn't a Mike fan because I'm a Laker fan, but you know, Mike.
Boo.
You just lost Tyree now.
Yo, I thought we were in this together, Tyree. Come on.
I'm just being a contrarian. Don't bother me.
Okay. So I mean, look, we all know how much Mike transcended cultures, and for him to be able to be a basketball player, a cultural icon, a fashion icon, and now a movie icon all in one was monumental to me. And that really resonated to me. And plus, you know, Jordan 11 Space Jams were hot.
Well, see, like, look, the fire that lit up in your eyes, and you can just even hear it in all three of your voices, that there is just something that connected you together. And even though the four of us were probably on all different parts of the planet and whatnot, different age groups and whatnot, but it's still, there's this bond that pop culture can really do. Like, it can really foster some true connections and bonds. So can you tell me, each of you, just also share maybe another pop culture moment for you that allowed you, that opened up the door for you to connect with others through a fandom? And this could be from when you were a kid, but this could also be really recent now. I mean, Tyree, you mentioned Bob's Burgers, you know, like, and how that connects you to people who maybe you would not have even met before, but they feel very connected with you because of your work through there. But yeah, guys, tell me some more about how pop culture has connected you and created some new relationships for you.
I definitely could speak on the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I think the way that they were able to build that out over the course of, 10, 12 years, I was able to gain so many friends. And in college, I would go to the movie premieres with groups of friends. We would talk about it. I still watch the theory videos on YouTube. Like, I think that it's definitely the Marvel Cinematic Universe, just the way they built it out and really told stories and developed characters. I think that's the reason I was able to build community around that.
Sidebar, let me dig into that just a little bit more. Anybody from the Marvel Cinematic Universe that you just fully connected with?
I have to say Iron Man. I think just for him to make such a powerful first couple of movies, I think it really set the bar for the rest of the universe. It really set the bar for the storytelling. It was, I think, aside from the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, one of the first most cohesive, well-told stories between the Hulk movie and Iron Man 1 and Iron Man 2. I think it really set up what happened in Endgame last year. I think they just did a really good job developing everybody and being able to keep most of the cast intact from start to finish.
Agreed. But the cast, trust me, the cast would be stupid not to be a part of that
whole
thing. That was a gravy train.
You don't want to jump ship. Although, hold on for a moment, sorry to Terrence Howard. Like, he was a great War Machine. He didn't stick all the way through, but Don Cheadle, we appreciate you.
That's on Terrence, and Terrence has been on record to say that was a mistake.
Oh, okay. So Tyree, actually, while you got the mic, pop culture property that's connected you to others.
I want to touch on sneaker culture for a bit. I create this comic called SNEDS, which is sneaker plus heads equals SNEDS. And for the past 10 years, crazy, this year, 10 years, I've been having commentary about the good parts and the bad parts of our culture called sneakers. And it's crazy how much it's changed in the last decade, right? Like, you think about the last decade up until now, I think it's funny to even point this out, but Kanye was probably at the beginning, starting that decade, and then to see where he is now, like, it kind of bookends the last 10 years in sneaker culture and the ripple effect his influence has had on it for good and for worse.
That's facts.
Yeah, I mean, I love the bookended illustration because it really paints how vivid he was integral to the sneaker culture.
Yeah, like the culture that we see today with resale, like, you can honestly say it started and ended with the Yeezy. Like, you talk about a shift, but Jordan clearly is right in that conversation, right? And to be a part of those conversations, like I said, telling the good parts of our culture, which is the sense of community, the sense of camaraderie, the new connections that you make, the reconnections that you'll make with people just through sneakers. But then to look at it from the other side, which is actually the appropriation side, resale culture, parasitic culture.
Man, resellers killed the game.
Yeah, man. And look, I know a lot of them, and big ones too. And it's like I love those dudes, but the new breed, there's something different with this digital warfare, that they got going on with the bots. Like, real genuine people cannot cannot partake in the culture because now it's an anxiety attack at 7 o'clock in the morning every Saturday.
I'm gonna catch an L. I'm gonna catch this L on Saturday.
You know what I'm saying? It just like being part of a culture where you're literally standing with your $200 in line and you can't spend it.
Yeah.
And you, but the day
That's
after,
a trip.
and the day after though, you can spend 1,000, but today
Right.
you can't spend 200. But tomorrow you can spend 1,000 if you really want it.
It hurts when you put it that way. It really does.
It's like that Futurama meme where he's like, take my money. Just take my money, please.
Yeah, and we all want to give it to them. We're like, here, Nike, and trust me, they would love to take your money, but only so many people can get the shoes. That's a dark place in the game, but it's created so many opportunities for me. I'm sure it's created opportunities for everybody here. And not only that, it's created opportunities, but it's based on things that we love and have passion for. And I'm still excited about it. I'm still in the game. I have not retired. Like, I still love it. I still love meeting people and talking about it. It's a source of inspiration. It's a muse for me. And I want to continue having these conversations.
Yeah, and Tyree, when you mentioned the resellers, and actually, Richard, when you talk about resellers killing the game, I think that also is something that translates to other forms of pop culture, right? And of just like collections. Anytime that somebody values something or collects something, and I'm talking about whether we're talking about Pokemon cards, which I heard are back in a big way, or Funko Pops, people, if you love something, if there's a limited release, people are going to grab it, and sometimes it's not always the actual fans that are the ones that get a chance to get their hands on it first. And so, yeah, just the resale thing, I think it's a very touchy one.
Remember, this idea of reselling is just another word for scalping. Scalping has been around forever. It's just creeping into other areas, as you say, Albert, in other areas of pop culture. Back in the day, it was concert tickets, it was Laker tickets, it's sneakers, it's stocks even. Like, there's so many things at play. It's like, oh, there's a big demand for it, but there's this many available. That's where the resellers win. Like, trust me, we all get the game, but it's a touchy subject.
So, Richard, what's a piece of pop culture that instantly, or even maybe progressively over time, ended up connecting you with the community and opening up doors for you?
Since I'm coming from the food space, I gotta speak on someone I grew up watching as a kid, and also someone more recently that I looked up to. Growing up as a kid, I would watch cooking shows and food shows, and there's this dude, Yan Can Cook. And I was like, man, this dude is killing it. He opened up to the door to like how broad and amazing and wonderful Chinese cuisine can be. So looking up, I was like, man, like, I'm Filipino, but he's another Asian cat, and I'm like, he's out there with his own cooking show, and people are feeling him, and like he has his own fan base. So that that is something that resonates for me growing up. And then more recently is Anthony Bourdain. Amazing man who flipped food journalism over. And granted that he's a white dude, but he didn't come with that white savior vibe, He really illustrated how food is a common thread through a lot of cultures. And I really looked up to that because he treated each and every country, dish, cuisine with respect and with proper homage to it, and also with a curiosity. He didn't come in trying to be an expert on anything. He didn't try to cook other people's food and say his tastes better. It's that genuine curiosity that he had that I really gravitate towards too, because I'm a curious person myself. Personal story, I had a Facebook post I wrote 4 or 5 years ago or something. I said, whatever Anthony Bourdain does for a living, I want to do. And then fast forward, where I'm on my first trip for Foodbeast, I'm in Aruba. And I had a moment, y'all, like, I got emotional because here I was in Aruba, eating Aruban food, and then I remembered, like, I'm doing this for work. And why? Because this cat, Anthony Bourdain, you know, did it the right way. He did it the proper way. It was the door that opened for me and led me to a place where I'm happy to be at.
This is the moment right there, man.
Yeah, I was on a private beach feeding this flamingo crying, you know?
Well, see, now that's the imagery that we needed.
I could dive into that. So,
Paint the picture, bro.
So I was feeding this flamingo, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like, I'm here, this is work. And then I was so lost in the moment that I jumped in the water with my phone in my pocket. And this was just the first day there. Yeah. So it was a wrap. But the beautiful thing was, I didn't record anything. I wasn't on my phone the rest of the trip. And I was so in the moment. I was so present for everything. I don't know if it happened for a reason, but I was able to immerse myself so much for that first trip for food. And I only have what lives up here. And that's why I want to go back to Aruba for a future Taste of Details episode and really kind of like recap that and kind of like make a full circle moment, because what lived on in here is something I want y'all to see.
You just gave us the ultimate teaser right there as well. Now, man, which we could just do a brain dump and get it all out. That's beautiful. Coming soon, right?
Yeah.
So when you spoke about Anthony Bourdain and when you spoke about really what resonated about him for you, it sounds like you're talking about appreciation. Like, it sounds like you are thankful and you honored and you saw the fact that he did his research. You know, he was a white guy. He didn't come from all of these different cultures. None of us can come from every culture, right? Yeah. But just because we don't come from a particular place, that does not close that place off to us. We know that there are certain pop culture properties, certain films, certain characters, certain moments that seem to be tied very specifically to certain cultures, right? So maybe a movie that the Black community really, really championed, or a character that the Asian American community really, really championed. But when is it okay for people who may not be from that exact same culture? When is it okay, and how is it okay for them to also jump on in and to celebrate? When can they wear the T-shirt of Black Panther, of Wakanda Forever, of Mulan, of Moana? Like, when can others get in, and how can they do that in a respectable way?
I think it's kind of like, think of it as a big house party, right? You invite everybody. Everybody's invited. Everybody is allowed to come through as long as they're on their act right. You know, you do not. Okay. You do not want some dude to be like, this party is dope, pulls the aux cord out and sticks it in his phone. You know what I mean? You gotta read the room and respect it. Like, I love Black Panther. I'll wear the Black Panther shirt or whatever, but I'm not gonna go in blackface and try to dress up as King T'Challa. You know what I mean? It's all about being up on that cultural nuance and being culturally sensitive to things, and it all goes back to being aware through research, through respect, and the effort. And if you really are a fan, then you will be doing those things.
There's definitely also a fine line between, like, when it comes to like brand marketing dollars, and then when it comes to fans showing love in the apparel. You know, when it's tasteful and it's respectful and it's fashionable, then it's okay. But if you're doing it in parody, or if you're taking someone's culture, if it's a fictitious, story that's meant to build hope, do it in a tasteful way. But if it's representing someone's direct culture, I think that's the part when it needs to be questioned.
Yeah, just to piggyback off that, I'd agree. I think we had a conversation about this earlier. Like, there's a character like Moana has cultural significance and cultural ties, you know, with her outfit, with her wardrobe, her garb. Whereas Black Panther, yes, there's some cultural cues, but Black Panther's super suit is not rooted, it doesn't have cultural roots, right? So somebody wouldn't be appropriating Black Panther because that's a suit that anybody can wear. Whereas Moana's costume, it's costume for the film, but it's more indicative of her culture, that's a fine line that you don't really want to touch on, because you would have been appropriating it. And it's not to say it's never, I would hope it's never for nefarious means. Like you don't hope to exploit it. You don't use it for personal gain. You don't use it in parody, as Geza said. But if you're respectful of it, you've done some research, you understand what you're getting into. I mean, who could fight that? Because at the end of the day, we're talking about sharing a love of something, a universal love, something that we can all participate in. And we should be more inclusive in that regard. I mean, yeah, it's been such a long time since people of color have found characters that they can relate to. And it's like, you want to covet that so much, but it's just like, nah, let other people in, but definitely be gatekeepers to who is coming in.
Fandom is that one big party.
Exactly.
I was going to say, that reminds me of what Richard said about the house party. It almost sounds like, you still want to have somebody at the door to make sure.
Absolutely.
Like, that's what I'm saying. The gatekeeper is just like, wait, hold on, homie.
Right.
This is still ours.
Right. But when you speaking, especially kind of now, since we're also talking about, we're talking about apparel, we're talking about fashion and style, but just things that people are wearing. I don't know. I'm immediately reminded of what we saw happen earlier this year with the Black Lives Matter movement, and seeing people across multiple races, across different age groups, just different demographics, but still all assembled wearing shirts that say Black Lives Matter, wearing masks that say Black Lives Matter. Now, some people took it to a different degree and started rocking kente cloth as well too, even though that was not maybe necessarily from their culture. But I do think people are trying, right? And it's just that sometimes these tries miss the mark a bit.
I know what you're saying. It's like you shot your cultural shot and you bricked. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, but we've seen this, in the 60s, during desegregation up until now, fighting against social injustice. People from all cultures want other people to know, like, hey, I agree. I am in the movement with you, and I will stand with you any way I can. And if they make some missteps, if they don't get the cultural cues, at least they are trying, as you say, and they are learning in the process, because that's all we want. We want people to stop being miseducated and stop being misinformed about who we are and what we represent, and we want them to learn more about us, and we're welcoming that. Like, remember, we haven't been the culture of exclusion. That's been the other side. We want to foster a more inclusive environment to say, yes, come along over here, but make sure, number one, that you acknowledge us, that you credit us, right? And sorry to say, that you pay us.
Yeah.
because we are the fathers and the mothers of this. And to not recognize that is criminal.
We are about that inclusivity, but we're gonna hold you accountable.
Exactly.
And that accountability is what's gonna be like the vibe check, in that party.
Whew, that was legit. So thank you guys for joining us for episode 3. We're going to continue to deep dive into the intersection of pop culture and race in our final episode, The Future of Pop Culture. I want to thank our panelists, Geza, Richard, and Tyree for joining us, and of course, our viewers that tuned in for this episode of BL Perspectives. I'm your host, Albert Lawrence, and I will see you soon for episode 4.